we're doing bows today. And it's looking like these characters are some of the most loved and hated units in the game. And we're going to be judging based on power, utility, usefulness to the team, versatility, all that stuff. And we're starting with Amber. Alright, Amber is interesting. I believe she's the first character you get. She's got a fun, quirky personality, and she is way too obsessed with bunnies and blowing them up. Overall, her power is not that great, but she's pretty fun to play because she tests your aiming. One of her constellations has to do with shooting the Baron Bunny, her skill that she sets off. If you shoot the Baron Bunny in the foot, then it blows up early. She's also the only character that shoots multiple arrows at the same time, which is pretty cool. A charge shot can have 2 arrows. You would think that it would do double the damage. Nope. I've seen some crazy numbers with the bunny triggering a melt when she's at C6, doing like 400,000 damage. But the setup for that is so hyper specific. They reset 30 times just to get it right. So it's completely unreliable, but it is fun to see. She has no utility for the team. She's going to be the DPS and not a good one at that. So her only redeeming qualities are her quirky personality, and she taught us how to fly. We're starting low. We're starting D. Chasca. Chasca is the newest 5-star. She is annoying. I hate the gun. I hate it. It's so cheesy. I don't know who was in charge of the design on that one, but riding a magnum pistol, a Western magnum pistol, like a horse, whistling it over and mounting it. How does she mount it? It's insane.
Or doesn't just increase her movement speed and resistance to interruption.
Now look at, she rides it like she's the coolest kid in school. She's like, what's up? You want to ride on my massive pistol? It's insane. That being said, she's powerful as fuck. Yeah, depending on who's on your party, she takes swirlable element types and packs them into a big bullet and shoots enemies. That's it. But they're pretty damn powerful. And teams are still being worked on right now, so she's not fully theory crafted or practical crafted. But as of now, people don't seem to regret getting her. I don't have her, personally. But as far as damage, you're not going to be disappointed. And I think she's going to have a lot of good teams, because there's so many elements you can mix her in with. So I'm going to say she's A. I don't think she's S. She's close. Very powerful, but just shy, I think. Collei. Collei's pretty interesting. She's a good 4-star for Dendro, for damage and application. She's pretty easy to use. She throws a boomerang. She's the only character that throws a boomerang, which is hella cool. Her burst has a ton of application, so if you're trying to bloom, if you're trying to burn, if you're trying to burgeon, hyper bloom, whatever, she's gonna be pretty good for it. And this makes sense, but all of the 5-stars are better, the 5-star Dendro characters, and that makes sense because she's a 4-star. But we're gonna rank her overall anyway. And I know a lot of people prefer her over the Dendro Traveler because of that dumb freaking pyro infusion explosion that ruins every rotation. So she's good. We're gonna put her in A. Okay, Diona. Diona was an early game sort of general support that never really fit into a hyper specific role. I think they spread her too thin. She's primarily a shielder, but she also heals a little bit, and she also increases some stats for your team, but not too many, and also debuffs opponents by a little bit. I think it's 10%, but her C6 is where she gets interesting, because whoever's within the radius of her burst gets 200 elemental mastery, and that is pretty good. You have to be above 50% health, but that's pretty easy to do, especially since she is a shielder, so she's going to help with not losing as much HP, but also if you run a healer and you dodge enough, should be no problem. So she's been used in a lot of screenshot comps where you're doing huge melt damage because you do a burst and set it up with that, and then you swap out and do an active character melt while they have that 200 EM boost which is pretty good. Now, where does she fall? That's kind of the problem. They spread her a little too thin in many areas, and the only thing that feels substantial enough to really even consider is the EM boost, but that is C6, which is difficult to get, as we have talked about. The shield is pretty strong though, but then again, she is cryo, and cryo needs some lovin', some TLC, which they're not getting, so she's gonna be our first C. Okay, Faruzan. Faruzan has been talked about at length by everyone in this community, I think, forever. She was super interesting when she first came out because we needed her pretty badly, because Wanderer mains and Xiao mains were struggling. So she boosts your Anemo DPS by a ton, only at C6. We all know this. She's only worth it at C6. She's hard to get because she's a 4-star. You have to get lucky with the pulls. But when you do get it, let me tell you, Xiao teams are now top 3 favorite teams to play. Very fun, big damage, consistent over 100k plunges, and they're great. I love seeing big green numbers. So we're going to keep her quick. C0 through 5, D at C6, S. Big problems being a 4-star, need a lot of luck, blah, 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 blah. I think she falls in B because she's hyper specific, very, very good at what she does, but you need C6, difficult to get. Stay in there. First B character. Fischl. Fischl is a great character. She's had an insane amount of buffs throughout the upgrades and patches, whether it's a new artifact or another teammate she works super well with, and then the release of Chevreuse. And of course, her C6 makes her that much better because at that point, Oz, her little raven, crow? Macaw? I don't know. Shoots electro damage bullets out of his little beak alongside your normal attacks. So as long as you're normal attacking, Oz is shooting electro, and that is huge. AoE, not good. Single target, very good. And she generates a ton of energy if you have any other electro characters on your team. C0, still very good. So there she is. First S, it's Fischl. Ganyu. Ganyu's cool, but by virtue of cryo, long forgotten. She does big damage, especially if you melt, which is really the only way that you get any real decent use out of her, unless you pair her with like Shenhe and Farina or Xingqiu and do some sort of freeze stuff, but we want to see the big numbers. She's pretty interesting. I mean, her skill is a taunt. She has a crit rate boost to herself within her kit, a cryo damage boost to herself within her kit. Pretty self-sufficient, honestly. So I think she's good. I think even if she came out today, people would be pretty excited because it's a unique playstyle. Obviously more unique before Liney because he does the same kind of 2-charge shot, but she kicks ass. We're gonna go A. She's an A DPS. Okay, Gorou. Gorou is interesting. He buffs your team's defense, which is really only good for a very select few characters. Really just 2, Ito and Noelle. And it's incentivized to run him with other Geo characters. And if you have 3 total Geo characters in your party, you get his cool crunch effect, which boosts Geo damage, which is the best of the 3. The first one is a defense bonus. The second one increases your resistance to interruption. The second one increases your instant reproduction. Your increased reproduction. But the third, Geo damage bonus, pretty good. And they scale with his talent level. It doesn't even scale with his defense or artifact stats or anything like that. So I've personally been waiting to get C6 so I could use him on an Ito team. But honestly, I don't even think Ito's best team has him anymore since Shalonen, which is a shame because that means he just isn't used, right? I think he's good at what he does. Again, you need C6. But it makes Ito and Noelle pretty good. So maybe I have to dig a little more. I'm a little iffy on this, but I'm saying C. Okay, Kujo Sara. Okay, Sara was essentially designed to be used with Hypercarry Raiden, and that was a pretty good team for a little bit. It didn't last super long, but it's cool to see big numbers from Raiden. She gives a decent attack boost, a really good attack boost, if I'm being honest, but it just doesn't last very long. Yeah, it lasts 6 seconds. So you have to use her right before you switch into your main DPS, and then you're getting a few seconds of action, which could be good if you have a front-loaded DPS, or if you're just going to use the burst real quick, like Raiden, if you swap in after Sara and just do your burst, you can see some big numbers. And it is based off of her base attack. Keep that in mind. It's not overall attack. So don't build her with attack, Sans Goblet, Crown. Because base attack only uses whatever attack her character itself has, plus the attack that the weapon has. So you add those two together, that's your base attack. All right, so it's important to build her with a high base attack bow if you're going to use her. Chances are you're not, because again, she's not really even worth using until C6, and we all know how difficult that is to get. And even afterwards, there's better options. So, are there any use cases for her? Sorta. In a very niche electro hyper carry, front-loaded, big damage, pew pew, 2 seconds of big action fun. But other than that now, so, bottom of C. I don't think she's D. I think she's pretty good at what she does, but just no one wants to do it. Liney, the magician. Liney's cool. I fuck with Liney. He's a powerful guy. And when he came out, I do believe he was the most powerful character at the time. His kit takes a little bit to get used to, right? You have to align you have to do a certain amount of charge shots and time it well with his skill before you do your burst and just make sure it's timed properly. So it takes a little bit to get used to, but if you do get used to it, you're seeing big damage. The only thing, he's a squishy little boy. He has low HP, and he gets knocked out of his charge attack if you step on his pinky toe. You need either a shielder or someone with interruption to resistance, like Zhongli or Dia. If you want to try some melt stuff, Diona, we were talking about before. But really, he likes to be used with only pyro characters. He gets some boosts within his kit, depending on how many pyro characters you have in your party. Yeah, so if you run him with literally only pyro characters, he deals 100% extra damage to opponents affected by pyro. Each character you take away that is no longer pyro reduces that by 20%, down to baseline 60%. He'll always get 60%, but you can get that to 100%, which is pretty good, but sometimes characters buff Liney enough that it's warranted to replace them with one of those pyro characters, like Kazuha, right? If he's on VV, you swirl pyro, the payoff from Kazuha's buff is worth more than the 20% damage bonus he would get by having a pyro character on his team. Right, so you don't have to do mono pyro. Honestly, he's just kind of fun. Big damage, funky looking cat, teardrop. Maybe he's been to prison. We don't know. He was definitely about to before we saved his ass. And everybody likes a bad boy. So S. I think he's S. Big damage. Ororon. I'll be honest, haven't done much testing with Ororon. He's new. I heard he's good. I've heard him compared to Fischl. Similar functionality, off-field electro damage. I don't think you have to spend any on-field time with him at all. Yeah, you place his skill down, it bounces between enemies. His burst is a taunt, also deals electro damage. But he's a little different with Night Soul than the other natlan characters. So he doesn't build it himself with anything he does specifically. The team members trigger it for him and build it for him by hitting enemies with hydro or electro attacks. And if they happen to electro charge while he has Night Soul points, then he does this funky little extra attack that just kind of further increases his off-field damage. So incentivized to use on electro charge. If you have his C1, that little extra damage from the electro charge does more damage. His C2 increases his own electro damage by a good amount, but his C6 really helps the team a little more. Now the active character gets 30% more attack, which is pretty good. So by virtue of that, being easy to play, incentivizing a new team composition that has been largely forgotten since the beginning of the game, and buffing the team, we gotta put him in S. We gotta. If Fischl's S, we gotta show him the same love, it looks like. Okay, Sethos. Sethos might be the most interesting character I've ever played. I love his... I hesitate to say playstyle because he has a couple. You can play him by strictly using charged attacks or his burst. So basically you want to build a ton of energy recharge on him, along with elemental mastery, because a lot of his attacks, his charge attacks, scales with elemental mastery. But basically, if he has enough energy, he will consume that energy, put it into his charged attack, and shoot a big fucking arrow through a few enemies and do a good amount of damage. And the bullet looks sick. So needless to say, he pairs well with Fischl because Fischl generates a lot of energy for him. And you could just stand in place and shoot these crazy charged attacks. And if you play him with a Dendro, you're getting your aggravates and quickens in, and they're gonna do even more damage. Or you can do his burst, which converts his normal shots into those charged shots. And in my experience, they do a little less damage. They still do good damage, but a little less. And they do fire quicker. Right? So overall, I notice my clear times are just a little under the charge shots, actually charging the shots. But if you like mashing, go for it. Yeah, I think he's powerful. We're going to put him in A. I think he's a good character. And he's a ton of fun. Sigewinne. Everybody hates Sigewinne. There's 2 people that play the game that don't hate Sigewinne. And honestly, that might be a stretch. Sigewinne heals. She's a healing Nouvelette wannabe that has maybe 3 or 4 replacements. If you like bubbles, get her, because she shoots them and they bounce. So that's fun. But that said, she is a good healer. I don't think she's D, but I don't think she's C either. She might be top of C. Yeah, I think top of C. Because I don't really think she's a B tier character, just because if you have a spot for her, you have a spot for someone better. Tartaglia. Childe. Alright, so I love this guy. Although he has one of the most underwhelming outfits in the whole game. Where's the color, guys? Everyone else has blues and reds and greens. He has gray? It's the best you got? I think his playstyle is super cool. You can use him as a bow character. You can use him as a melee character with his skill. His skill attacks don't do very much damage whatsoever. So generally, you just use him to apply Hydro so someone else can utilize that. Like Xiangling in international teams. That's his primary use case right now. But Childe International is a fantastic team. There's no problems. But if we're going to rate him in a vacuum as the character on his own, I still think he's good because his burst can do a ton of damage if you vape it. And you can use him on freeze teams too. He does apply Hydro with every, well, not with every hit, but very quickly. And if you use him with a grouper like Kazuha, his Riptide, is that what it's called? Yeah, his Riptide gets kind of nasty. If there's a ton of opponents and you activate that Riptide on one of them, just triggers to everyone else, it's like landmines. I want to get him C6 pretty bad. I've seen a showcase of that, and that shit was awesome. So I think he's A. Tignari. These guys just sound like they're from The Sopranos. Hey, it's my cousin Tignari. Yeah, you know him. You know, his grandma makes the best raviolis on Central Boulevard. Tignari's good as fuck. You don't need to build really any energy on him. His burst does insane damage. His skill is a taunt, so it allows you to kind of just group up some enemies and shoot them with these fine arrows that do pretty insane damage. His constellations are linearly better each time, and they're all useful. And he's on the standard banner. He's a good freaking character, man. Honestly, I can't think of any flaws with him, except maybe doing a little more damage early constellations. But even that, you can build him pretty good. And he has a great 3-star weapon that you will get hundreds of copies of during the game. Slingshot. Slingshot's pretty baller for him and Sethos, actually. So he's S, dude. Good freaking character. Venti, the Forgotten God. That's probably the title of his autobiography. Venti's good, but kind of irrelevant. His biggest problem is the content of the game has switched from multi-target, movable enemies to one-target, chunky enemies that can't move. And you play him if you want to group the shit out of anyone under 5 feet tall. And he does it real good. And I feel like not many people talk about this. He'll regenerate energy to your character of whatever element he swirls from his burst. Aside from that, his character is pretty awesome. He's the first Archon you see in the story. He's just good vibes. I think that's it. Just wants to play music and get drunk. Got a lot of uncles like him. I think he's a good character, and I think he's largely underrated, honestly. We're going to put him in B for relevance, because a lot of times you'd rather just run Kazuha for a bigger buff. But if you're going to group, it's Venti. Alright, 2 more. Yelan. 2 Reasons to play Yelan. Big damage, ton of Hydra application. Just build a ton of HP on her, triple HP for your artifacts, and her burst increases the damage that your active character deals, scaling up every second. So sort of an inverse teammate to Kujo Sara. You get a ton of boost right in the beginning and you need high front-loaded damage. With Yelan, it would be useful to pair her with someone who is either on field for a long time, like Sino, or even Ito, because you want to make sure they're going to be on the field enough to stack that damage up. It's pretty good. I don't think many people use her for that specifically, though. I think the Hydra application and the damage she does personally is enough for her to just be a great character. And people still use her on Arlecchino teams, even though Arlecchino's damage drops over time. Maybe that would be a good way to balance it out, because her damage will drop with every hit, but will be buffed a little bit as Arlecchino is on the field by Yelan's buff. So maybe that is a good way to mitigate the loss of damage over time. Plus, you're vaping. Good shit. S-rated character. Bows are popping off. Yoimiya, the pyromaniac daddy's little girl. She's pretty good. Pretty good damage. Definitely easy to play. It's just normal attacking. Right, you activate her skill, pop a couple of normal attacks out there, and just get nasty with it. She pairs well with Yelan, because Yelan's burst activates with normal attacks. And if you end the rotation off with her burst, she will provide a little bit of an attack bonus to your team. Not substantial, but it's something. And it's something to hold them over while they're setting her up again for another rotation. So I think she's alright. I think her damage numbers just aren't keeping up with the little scent of power creep that we're experiencing right now, especially because we have so many pyro DPSs. So I'm gonna say B. Yeah, I think she's decent, but could be better. All right, let's readjust. Okay, we have our readjustment. Bows are interesting. That's a lot of S's. It's fair though. It's fair game. Fuck yeah, bows. All right, tell me what's going on. Tell me where I triggered you, and we'll see you for the last weapon type in the lineup. Catalysts. Ciao.